The night Rachel asked me why I never dated anyone, I realized that sometimes the person you're waiting for has been standing 3 feet away from you the entire time, wondering the exact same thing.
My name is David Chen.
I'm 41 years old and I restore vintage furniture for a living, which means I spend most of my days alone in a workshop that smells like linseed oil and sawdust, coaxing broken things back into shape. 3 years ago, my marriage ended quietly, the way a candle burns down when no one's paying attention. My ex-wife loved the idea of a creative life until she realized creative meant uncertain, and uncertain meant she'd married someone who measured success in completed chairs rather than quarterly bonuses. I wasn't angry about it, just tired. I had spent the year after the divorce getting used to coming home to an empty apartment that stayed exactly as I left it, which was either peaceful or depressing depending on the day. The one constant in my life during that time was the gym at 6 a.m, 3 days a week, where I met Rachel Moss. She was 43, worked as a civil engineer for the city, and had the kind of dry humor that made you laugh before you realized she'd made a joke. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that was always coming loose by the end of the workout, and she had a habit of showing up in old college sweatshirts with holes in the sleeves that she refused to throw away. We'd been paired up by a trainer 2 years ago during a partner workout session, and we'd just kept showing up at the same time ever since. It wasn't planned. It just worked. We spotted each other on bench presses, argued about whether deadlifts or squats were worse, and occasionally grabbed coffee afterward at the diner across the street where the menus apologized for nothing and the waitress called everyone Han. I liked her. I'd always liked her. But somewhere along the way, liking her had turned into something heavier, something I didn't know how to name and definitely didn't know how to mention, so I just kept showing up and pretending that the best part of my week was the workout and not the person holding the other end of the resistance band. It was a Thursday morning in late September when everything shifted. The gym was nearly empty, just the hum of old fluorescent lights and the rhythmic clank of weight plates. We were halfway through a circuit taking a water break between sets when Rachel leaned against the squat rack and looked at me with that expression she got when she was about to say something that mattered. "Can I ask you something personal?" I wiped my forehead with my shirt. "After 2 years of watching me struggle with pull-ups, I think we're past polite boundaries." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Why don't you ever date anyone?" I set my water bottle down slowly. "That's a hell of a question for 6:30 in the morning. I'm serious." She crossed her arms, and I noticed the way her sweatshirt sleeve had slipped down over her hand. "You're smart, you're decent, you're not bad-looking when you're not drenched in sweat. But in the entire time I've known you, you've never mentioned going on a date. Never mentioned meeting anyone? Never even mentioned wanting to." I looked at her for a long moment, trying to figure out how to answer a question I'd been avoiding asking myself. "I don't know. I guess I got tired of trying to explain to people why I care about furniture." "That's a terrible excuse." "It's the truth." She studied me, and the air between us felt heavier than it had a minute ago. Then she said very quietly, "Is it because of me?" The gym seemed to go silent. Even the fluorescent lights stopped humming. I stared at her, and she stared back, and I realized that this moment had been building for 2 years, and I had somehow missed every single warning sign. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you show up here 3 times a week, right when I show up, and you've never once suggested we work out at different times. I'm talking about the fact that you buy my coffee and you remember how I take it. I'm talking about the fact that when my engagement ended last year, you didn't ask a single question. You just said, want to add an extra set today? And let me work through it without making me explain myself." She paused, and her voice dropped even lower. "I'm talking about the fact that I think you're careful around me, and I don't know if that's because you're trying to be a good friend or because you're trying not to be something else." I set my water bottle down and looked at the floor because looking at her was too much. "Rachel, you don't have to answer that," she said quickly. I shouldn't have asked. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't forget it. And I couldn't let her walk it back, because if I did, we'd spend the next 2 years pretending this conversation never happened, and I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what would have changed if I'd just been honest. "It's because of you," I said. She went very still. "I don't date anyone because the only person I want to have coffee with already has coffee with me 3 times a week, and I didn't want to ruin that by being the guy who couldn't just let it be enough." I finally looked up at her. "So yeah, it's because of you." She didn't say anything for what felt like an hour. Then she picked up her water bottle, took a long drink, set it back down, and said, "We should probably finish this set before the gym gets crowded." I blinked. "That's it?" "What did you want me to say?" "I don't know." "Something other than, let's do another set of squats." She looked at me, and there was something in her expression I couldn't read. "David, I just asked you a question I've been too scared to ask for 6 months, and you just gave me an answer I didn't think I'd actually get. I need a minute to process that before I say something I can't take back." She picked up her towel. "So we're going to finish this workout, and then we're going to go get coffee like we always do, and then we're going to figure out what the hell we're doing." We finished the workout. I don't remember a single rep. The diner across the street was the kind of place that hadn't changed its menu or its decor since 1987, and I loved it for that. We sat in our usual booth by the window, and the waitress brought us coffee without asking because she'd seen us here every Thursday for 2 years. Rachel wrapped both hands around her mug and stared at it like it held answers. "I was engaged," she said finally. "For 3 years. His name was Colin. He was a lawyer, very successful, very sure of himself. He liked that I had my own career, right up until my career meant I couldn't make it to his firm's holiday parties or his college friends' weddings. He proposed because it made sense on paper. I said yes for the same reason." She looked up at me. "And then one day I was at the gym, and I was working out with this guy who restored furniture and made jokes about protein powder, and I realized I was happier at 6 in the morning in a gym that smelled like disinfectant than I was in my own apartment. That's when I knew I couldn't marry Colin." "When did you end it?" 14 months ago. "Right before Thanksgiving?" She took a sip of coffee. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to think I was some kind of mess who couldn't hold a relationship together. I wouldn't have thought that." "No. You would have just added an extra set and let me work through it, which is exactly what you did." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "You're very consistent, David. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "It's a terrifying thing, because I've spent the last year trying to figure out if you were just being nice, or if you felt the same way I did, and I couldn't ask because if I was wrong, I'd lose the best part of my week." I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were warm from the coffee mug. "You weren't wrong." She looked down at our hands, and when she looked back up, her eyes were a little brighter. "So what do we do now?" "I think we finish our coffee, and then maybe we stop pretending this is just a workout partnership. And if it doesn't work, then we'll deal with it. But I'd rather try and fail than spend the next 10 years wondering what would have happened if I'd just asked you to dinner." She squeezed my hand. "Okay." "Okay." "Yeah. Ask me to dinner, David." I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. "Rachel, would you like to have dinner with me? Somewhere that doesn't serve protein shakes?" "I'd love that." We had dinner that Friday at a small Italian place she knew near her apartment, the kind of restaurant where the owner greeted regulars by name and the wine list was written on a chalkboard. She wore a green sweater I'd never seen before, and her hair was down, which I'd also never seen, and I realized I'd spent 2 years memorizing her in workout clothes and had no idea what she looked like when she was trying. She looked incredible. We talked about everything we'd somehow never covered in 2 years of coffee after workouts. I told her about the furniture projects I was working on, a set of dining chairs from the 20s that had been water damaged and nearly thrown out. She told me about the bridge project she was overseeing, the politics of city contracts, the satisfaction of watching something she'd designed actually get built. We didn't talk about the gym. We didn't need to. This was different, and we both knew it. Halfway through the meal, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression changed. "Everything okay?" "It's Colin." She set the phone face down on the table. "He wants to meet for coffee next week. Says he wants closure." "Do you want to go?" "No. But he'll keep texting until I say yes or tell him to stop, and I don't have the energy for either right now." I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place to tell her what to do. But I reached across the table and took her hand again, and she held on tighter than she had at the diner. "You don't have to answer him tonight," I said. "I know. But if I don't, he'll assume I'm avoiding him, and then he'll show up at my office or my apartment because Colin doesn't understand the word no. Then tell him you're busy." She looked at me, and there was something grateful in her expression. "I'll handle it, I promise." The rest of dinner was good. Better than good. We stayed until the restaurant started putting chairs on tables, and then I walked her back to her car, and we stood in the parking lot under the streetlights like two people who didn't want the night to end but didn't know how to make it last. "Can I see you this weekend?" I asked. "We have our Saturday workout." "I meant outside the gym." She smiled. "I know what you meant." "Yes, you can see me this weekend." I kissed her then, because waiting felt impossible, and she kissed me back, and it was everything I'd imagined for 2 years except better, because it was real. When we finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine and said, "You're going to ruin me for all future workout partners." Good. That Saturday, Colin showed up at the gym. I didn't recognize him at first. He was tall, polished, wearing gym clothes that looked like they'd been ironed, and he walked in during the middle of our workout with the kind of confidence that suggested he owned the building. Rachel saw him before I did, and I felt her go tense beside me. "Is that him?" "Yeah." Colin walked over like he'd been invited. "Rachel." "I texted you." "I know. I've been busy." "Too busy to answer a text?" He glanced at me like I was a piece of equipment someone had left out. "Who's this?" "This is David. My workout partner." "Right. The furniture guy." He said it the way someone might say, "the janitor." Then he looked back at Rachel. "Can we talk? Privately? We're in the middle of a set. It won't take long. Just 5 minutes." I started to step back because this wasn't my fight, but Rachel caught my wrist. Anything you want to say to me, you can say in front of David. Colin's jaw tightened. Fine. I think you made a mistake. I think you ended things because you were scared, not because you didn't love me, and I think if you'd just give me another chance, we could fix this. I didn't make a mistake, Colin. And I wasn't scared. I just finally admitted I didn't want to marry you. Because of him? Colin looked at me again, and this time there was something ugly in his expression. You left me for a guy who plays with old chairs? I felt Rachel's grip on my wrist tighten, and I knew if I said anything, this would get worse. So I didn't. I just looked at Colin and waited. I restore furniture, I said quietly. And Rachel didn't leave you for me? She left you because you treated her engagement like a contract negotiation. Colin's face went red. You don't know anything about us. I know she's happier now than she was a year ago. That's enough. He opened his mouth to say something else, but Rachel stepped between us. Colin, I'm not having this conversation with you. I'm not giving you closure. I'm not giving you another chance. I'm asking you to leave. And if you don't, I'm going to call the front desk and have them remove you. For a moment, I thought he was going to push it. But then he looked at Rachel, really looked at her, and whatever he saw made him step back. Fine. But when this doesn't work out, don't come crying to me. I won't, Rachel said. Goodbye, Colin. He left. The gym felt quieter without him, and Rachel let out a long breath. Are you okay? I asked. Yeah, I'm okay. She looked up at me. Thank you for not punching him. I thought about it. I know. That's why I held your wrist. We finished the workout, but neither of us was really focused. Afterward, we sat in her car in the parking lot, and she rested her head on the steering wheel. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm not. I'm glad I was there. She lifted her head and looked at me. You didn't have to defend me. I know. But I wanted to. She kissed me then, hard and desperate, like she was trying to prove something to herself, and I kissed her back, and when we finally pulled apart, she was crying. Hey, I said softly. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She wiped her eyes. I spent 3 years with someone who made me feel like I had to be smaller to fit into his life, and then I meet you, and you make me feel like I'm exactly the right size. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just pulled her close and let her cry against my shoulder until she was ready to stop. 6 months later, we were sitting in my workshop on a Sunday afternoon, surrounded by half-finished chairs and the smell of wood stain. Rachel was reading a book in the corner, her legs tucked under her, and I was sanding a tabletop that didn't really need more sanding, just because I liked having her there while I worked. David? Yeah? Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't asked you that question at the gym? I set the sandpaper down. All the time. Me too. She closed her book. I think we would have kept showing up at 6 in the morning and pretending we were just friends until one of us moved or changed gyms or died. That's a depressing thought. It is. But it's also why I'm glad I asked. She stood up and walked over to me, wrapping her arms around my waist from behind, because this is better than anything I imagined. I turned around and kissed her, and she kissed me back, and I realized that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you didn't know you were waiting for until they've been standing next to you the entire time. A year after that, I proposed to her in the same gym where she'd asked me why I never dated anyone. It was 6 in the morning, the lights were buzzing, and she was halfway through a set of deadlifts when I got down on one knee with a ring I'd been carrying in my gym bag for 2 months, waiting for the right moment. She dropped the barbell, started crying, and said yes before I could even finish asking the question. We got married 6 months later in my workshop, surrounded by furniture I'd restored and people who didn't care that the venue smelled like linseed oil. Rachel wore a simple dress and flowers in her hair, and when the officiant asked if I took her to be my wife, I said, I've been taking her to be my wife for 3 years. I'm just making it official. She laughed and cried at the same time, and I kissed her, and the best part of my life stopped being the workout and started being everything that came after. So here's my question for you. What would you have done if someone you'd been working out with for 2 years asked if you were avoiding dating because of them? And have you ever realized that the person you were waiting for was standing right next to you the entire time, just waiting for you to notice? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.